This is the full podcast or full meeting on Discord between Haqiqatjou and SNEAKO. Let's watch this beautiful, beautiful podcast. We will learn more about many things. I don't know. What are you gonna learn?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you, Daniel?
Walaikum
Sam, good.
assalam.
How are you doing, bro?
Good. It's been a pretty fun couple days on the internet. You've been involved in this conversation, and I think this is the perfect time to do a follow-up call. I think the last time we streamed together was during the month of Ramadan, was it not?
Yes.
Yeah.
You did,
That was
bro.
a good stream.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
You were in Medina, I think.
Yeah, I was in Medina. Since then, I want to appreciate you. I watched your whole breakdown of the Moist Critical debate. I liked it. And since then, I actually do watch your channel. I like your breakdowns. Just the other day, I was watching one of your old videos, it's sort of my most popular, and you were covering this one lady who wore like a turban hijab, and she was like trying to infiltrate with LGBT and stuff like that. You do good breakdowns. So whenever I get like, I finish a book or something and I'm like tired of reading, I've been turning on your videos.
All right, that's good. I'm happy to hear it.
Yeah, W Glaze. But so, yeah, how you been? First off, before we get into, obviously we have a lot to talk about.
Pretty good. Just been busy with putting together content. I also teach courses. Also taking care of family. So I have 5 young boys, and we
Whoa,
homeschool. So I'm busy with them all the time.
Mela bless
But
you,
yeah,
bro.
stuff like that.
5
Just
young
very-
boys. Wait, would you consider yourself? Are you white? You're Iranian, but is that white? Like that's a funny conversation because it seems like if you are white, you're beating the replacement right now by having 5 white sons.
Yeah. Well, you could consider me white if you consider like Aryan. I haven't done like a DNA test, but if you consider Aryan, because both my parents are from Shiraz, which is like right in the center of Iran, so it's considered Aryan, or Indo-European. But my kids are kind of half-breeds though, because my wife is Egyptian. So
Oh, okay. Too bad. I was about to say like, hey, you're defeating the white replacement right now by having 5 Muslim, doing a lot more than these white supremacists actually, if they were full white.
yeah, so yeah, I don't know if we're helping the white race, but since I'm race mixed, but alhamdulillah, it's all good.
Well, okay, you helped half of them out. I mean, there's a lot of people that are race mixed in this regardless, but
Right.
there's a lot that I want to talk about with you. But first, I want to hear. I saw you like my tweet where I was saying that Islam fixes the problem of white genocide because a lot of them they identify white. They say that they're white Christians, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which first off, that's not something we say in Islam. We don't say like we're Iranian Muslim or I'm Asian Muslim. You just say you're Muslim. And so they identify with this. But if they really care about whiteness, then Islam fixes the problem that has been clearly addressed in the West, where it comes to usury, porn, gambling, when it comes to feminism and liberalism. For example, you homeschool your kids. They're not going to be indoctrinated by LGBT. Your wife is definitely not a feminist. And right, you could have multiple wives if you want, and then have a lot of kids. Like you could have up to, you could have 10 kids if you follow that logic. And that'd be the best way to defeat the white genocide that they talk about. So why do you think that they don't convert to Islam and find this solution?
Well, they're just misdiagnosing the problem. Like, it's shocking that they want to blame minorities for their problems when the bigger problem that they face, what's really generating this replacement, is liberalism. It's this philosophical liberalism that started in the Enlightenment over 200 years ago in Europe. And when I say that to people, they don't always understand, like, well, what do you mean? Like, how is that relevant to white replacement? I guess the first thing that we should say, like, do you agree that there is like this phenomenon of white replacement?
Yeah, I do. I think that they're starting to, yeah. I mean, they used to be a majority in a lot of these Western countries, and now they're not.
Do you think there's like a deliberate program to do this?
I think the Zionists do want to replace white people, yeah.
Okay. I would agree. Like, I think that Zionists are interested in that. But I also think a lot of whites actually A lot of whites want to be more diverse. Like, so, like if you, that's one of the things that these white nationalists ignore, is that the biggest proponents of white replacement are white people. The people that we see online, the ones that are active on Twitter, or some of these figures that we will see like in the alt-right, quote unquote, they're like a very fringe minority of whites.
That's true.
The vast majority of whites, they have no problem
Race
with
mixing.
immigration, race mixing, like, but why is that? Like, why is that the case? And you can blame like, oh, it's because of Jews. Like, that's the argument that they will make. Like, oh, we've just been indoctrinated by this foreign power that like has mind control apparently. Okay, fine, but the thing is that it's coming from a certain ideology. It's coming from a certain ideology that says that it doesn't matter your race, your ethnicity, your culture, it doesn't matter your religion. We're all the same and we should all be, you know, together. This without any kind of distinguishing between one person or another. Like, we're all human beings. Like, where this is the ideology that whites, the majority of whites, have adopted, but it's an ideology that comes from whites. Whites invented this ideology. And when I say whites invented it, like, I'm not trying to slam whites. I'm not trying to say that whites are terrible and they're responsible for this or that and they have to pay reparations or anything like that. I'm just using the same kind of racial analysis that these white nationalists use themselves to critique blacks or to critique Muslims or to critique Hispanics or Haitians. Like, they use this kind of racial analysis. They say, like, look at the racial tendencies of these blacks or these Haitians. Look at the racial tendencies of Jews. Like, Jews do X, Y, and Z. Look at the racial tendency of Asians or Arabs. They're doing this kind of racial analysis. So all we can say is like, okay, fine. You want to play that game? You want to play the game of racial analysis? Let's analyze the white race. Let's play the same game. Let's turn the tables and say, what have whites contributed? And one of the biggest things that they've contributed in their history is exactly this concept of liberalism, that racial distinctions don't matter, ethnic distinctions don't matter, religious distinctions don't matter. You have to strip yourself of all of these distinctions so that you can be a part of the human family. Like, that's a big part of what liberalism is, that was ushered in the Enlightenment in the 18th century, 17th and 18th century in Europe. And it started in France, it started in Britain. And you had these philosophers who said that, look, religion is something that is backwards. It's holding society back. It's holding humanity back. Religion, the Bible, we have to get rid of this religiosity. We have to get rid of the church. The church is an evil influence. The Pope is literally a terrorist, right? These are the kinds of ideas that they had. We have to base society on science and reason. And we have to determine, like, what's the best for the human race on the basis of science and reason, not these stupid religious books. Religion is just backwards mythology, savagery. So we have to have our own religion, the human religion. And that's based on what? The ultimate value of freedom and equality. Equality on the basis of being human, not these man-made distinctions like religion. So yeah, but they were white supremacists. They were white supremacists.
So this is what the founding fathers believed in, this Enlightenment theory. It came from French philosophers, the Freemasons that founded America. How did this Enlightenment theory come about? Because like they believed in like there's a unity of all Abrahamic faiths. They believed in like there's something in every religion. Kind of like I saw, not to be disrespectful to the Christians, but I saw the Pope say something recently where he's saying, actually I think it was in, I'm not sure if that was in your video or not, but the Pope said like there's a basis of truth in all Abrahamic faiths and all, even Hinduism, they all believe in God and we should get to the message of God. Is that where did this Enlightenment theory come about?
Well, it started basically with the scientific revolution. The scientific revolution. I mean, if we want to go through a whole history, like we have to get into the religious wars that ultimately led to Protestantism, like the Protestant Reformation, how that ushered in the scientific revolution, and then ultimately modernity, like the beginning of modernity, like that kind of history. It's a multi-century history. But the basic idea, like if we can summarize, is that science is the ultimate value. Like science is what brings humanity up out of savagery and barbarism into the light of civilization. And what really is key with science, it's your race. Why? Because which race invented science, like modern mathematical science? It's the white race. Who was Isaac Newton? Like arguably the greatest scientist, maybe the first scientist, theoretical physicist. It's Isaac Newton. He's white. He's British, right? Or all of these other founders of these scientific theories at that time in the 17th, 18th, 19th century, they're white. So the theory was that whites, because of higher intelligence, because of higher IQ, they're able to develop science. This is why science didn't come out of Africa. This is why science didn't come out of South America. It didn't come out of the Native Americans. It didn't come from the Muslims. The kind of mathematical science and the revolution, what revolutionized the world and all of history, was the scientific revolution and then the industrial revolution. That is a product of white genius. So this is the argument that they made, and then they said, based off of that, we have to basically reform all of society. We have to reform all of our morals, our values. Like, it's stupid, it's backwards, unscientific if you believe that there's God who sends down revelation. If God exists, he doesn't care about what humans do, like on this one rock that circles the sun amongst, billions and hundreds of billions of stars in our galaxy, etc. Why would God care? Like, this is the view of the founding fathers. They were deists. They believe that there's a impersonal God that just sets the universe in motion in like a clockwork, and he doesn't actually interfere in human affairs or even care about human affairs. They're deists in that sense. So they're anti-Christian. They're anti the Bible. These are the founders, the founding fathers. People like Thomas Jefferson. So Thomas Jefferson, when he's writing the Declaration of Independence, it's based on what? It's based on
Enlightenment.
Liberalism, enlightenment. These values of the most important thing for human beings is freedom and equality and democracy. Like, those values, it's coming from these people who believe that science is the ultimate arbiter of truth, and the white mind, it has the highest IQ and is able to discover this science. Now, what they decided at this point is to say that, look, we want to spread the gospel of science through the entire globe. And you have all of these savages and barbarians that are, living short and brutish lives because they're savages. They're killing each other. They're just, they're cannibals, or they are beating their women, and they are doing X, Y, Z. We have to civilize them and bring them the light of reason. We have to teach them that their religion is just a bunch of superstitious myths, falsehoods. We have to teach them this. This is our burden. This is the white man's burden.
Manifest destiny, is that the philosophy?
Yeah, that's part of it. That's part of it.
Right.
These savages, these Native American savages, the Indians or Indians, Redskins, we have to civilize them. All the criticisms, by the way, that you hear today against Muslims have been used on Native Americans. They practice polygamy, like a man and multiple wives. They would have like certain gender segregation. They didn't believe, they didn't believe traditionally in, our women, we have to send them to become boss babes. It's like hardcore patriarchy. The Enlightenment, part of the justification that they gave for wiping out the Native Americans and their culture is that this is a barbaric culture. Like, this is patriarchal. This is anti-woman. We have to civilize them, bring them into the light of reason. Now, if they don't accept our system, our civilization, then we'll just wipe them out. Like, that's fine. Like, you can wipe out entire people, because ultimately it's going to be for the better to just wipe them out, like as if they're viruses. And then whoever agrees with us, great, you can be a part of our beautiful European civilization and be enlightened by the white race, or we'll exterminate you. So a lot of genocide has been justified on the basis of Enlightenment ideals. And the first victims of this, by the way, of the Enlightenment were the Europeans themselves. The Europeans themselves were the first victims because many Europeans did not want to get rid of their religion. They didn't want to abandon Catholicism, for example. There were deeply traditional people in Europe, but then from Northwestern Europe, you had people like Napoleon Bonaparte, who was enlightened. You had the French Revolution, which overturned the monarchy, overturned the church, and established, this liberal democracy. And they enforced it through war and genocide, and they spread it through the Napoleonic Wars. And at one point, Napoleon even put the Pope in prison. He even imprisoned the Pope because the Pope, he felt, was not subservient enough to him as the ultimate monarch. So this is, anyway, a complicated history. But the point is that this kind of idea, the Enlightenment ideals, was anti-religion. It spread through Europe, killed millions of people. Then they spread it to the rest of the world through colonialism. And it's white supremacist. It's all on the basis that whites are the superior race. Religions are backward. They have to be eradicated. So this progressed all the way until World War II. World War II happened. The Western countries became really shocked because of Hitler and Hitler's theories. They said that this is clearly a problem. So they readjusted their strategy, and they made dissolution of race also a part of the liberal project. Like, race is another source of identity, like being a white race. Being in addition to being religious, like you're a Christian, you're a Muslim, you're a Hindu, or you're Chinese, you're Japanese, you're Native American, or you're white, you're black, this is a problem. So then they made racial identity also as a target to be dissolved, just like they were targeting religions and cultures. And so this kind of white replacement, yeah, it is a deliberate program. It's a continuation of the Enlightenment project. But it's also a product of white people invented this.
Do you think that by extension, the neocon movement or even the Nazi movement can be attributed to the Enlightenment movement?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's all modernity. Like, this is all coming from like the principles of liberty and freedom as the highest ideals. Like, those are the things that were preached by Hitler, for example. Like, that's what he preached as well, that these are the highest ideals. Hitler wasn't trying to, revive the church and create a theocracy. Like, he was concerned with fascism is primarily concerned with maximizing freedom and equality of people. They just have a different approach than other subgroups of liberalism. But if you think of liberalism as this big umbrella, there are sub-ideologies, like there's communism, there's socialism, there's national socialism. But the differences between them, there are differences, but they all agree that the most important ideals are liberty and equality. They just differ on how to maximize, or what is the best approach for maximizing liberty and equality. But they don't disagree on the fundamentals, as opposed to like a religious system, like an Islamic system, where we don't, as Muslims, we don't say like the most important thing is freedom and equality. Yeah, freedom and equality are good, like those are important values, but we don't destroy everything on the basis of freedom and equality. Like, there are other values. God is at the top, like God, worshiping God, being subservient to God, living a godly life. But then we also want to preserve marriages. We want to preserve communities. We want to preserve human life. Like, those are other priorities that come ahead of just freedom and equality.
Mm-hmm. So why do you think that white people don't take any responsibility for this issue? Because when you talk about white genocide or white replacement, it seems like most of the white people that I speak to online, all the blame goes to the Jews or the Zionists. Do you think that white people should bear responsibility for what happened?
If they want to start playing the race game and start blaming different races or critiquing other races, or just looking at the world through this prism of race, then if they're consistent and they're honest, then they should also look at the contributions of the white race and the problems that have been caused because of white supremacy, this Enlightenment project that they're suffering from today. Mm-hmm. I'll give you an example. I'll give you like a very concrete example. you're familiar with all of the hate and critique that these white nationalists direct at blacks, like black Americans.
Yeah.
Like they're lazy, they are their communities are filled with drugs, their fathers are missing, they are violent, the kids are out of control, like these youths, whatever you want to call them, are causing all kinds of crime. Like these kinds of criticisms are given to blacks, and they just blame blacks because, well, this is their race. Like they have lower IQ, they have these kinds of violent tendencies racially. Like this is what they're arguing. Mm-hmm. But look at the history of blacks. Look at blacks in Africa. Black people in Africa are highly traditional. Like look at blacks in Nigeria, for example. Look at blacks in different parts of Africa. They are in very traditional societies. They're also very patriarchal. The Muslim ones especially. They do not engage in like promiscuous behavior. The fathers are very committed. Like it's very structured societies. Very traditional. Family values are very important. The rate of STDs are the lowest. These Muslim parts of Africa, you have the rates of illegitimate children being born at the lowest level statistically. Violence is extremely low, much lower than anywhere in the West. So if it were something genetic or if it were something racial, why would we see these differences, these stark differences? When you look at American culture or Western culture, what are they constantly preaching in terms of women, for example? They're constantly telling women to be promiscuous. They're from a very young age. Girls are indoctrinated into thinking that being a slut is a good thing. Yep. Going and displaying your body, being sexy, attracting the attention of men, that's a great thing. Well, guess what? Who has been targeted most by this kind of pro-sexuality, pro-slutty propaganda? It was mainly directed towards the black community historically. Or look at drugs. The effect of drugs on a community is devastating. Drug use can destroy not only families, but entire communities. It's known that the U.S. government was involved in spreading crack into black communities, selling crack into black communities for the purpose of getting money, and funding their programs like CIA programs using this kind of black money.
Ronald Reagan, right?
Yeah, exactly. Iran-Contra, all of that history, that destroyed so many black communities, like entire communities. And you can't tell me that this doesn't have an impact on fatherhood. It doesn't. Does this not have an impact on the family structure? Or look at abortion. Like it's a well-known fact that Planned Parenthood, most of their clinics are in black neighborhoods. They promote abortion the most to the black community. What does that do to your families? What does that do to your community? When your women are feminists, like hardcore feminists, your men are being targeted for drug addiction, and your children are in these broken families. Like it destroys entire generations. So we can go on and on. When white people, on the other hand, like they get hit with this whole opioid crisis, then they're the victims of big pharma. They're the victims of big pharma, even though entire communities of whites have been destroyed as well. Right. But it's recent. It's like one generation delayed. So everything that has been used to destroy the black community,
it's their fault.
Now a generation.
It's all the black people's fault for getting addicted to crack. But when white people, and this is all over rural America, the people that they keep saying it's the supreme race, where the fentanyl crisis and the drug crisis, the opioid crisis, is one of the biggest detriments to middle America. But they don't speak. They always blame the problem on immigrants.
Yeah, they don't blame it on white people. They don't blame it on this is something that is a racial problem with whites.
They need to take accountability for that. See, when it's black people, it's like, it's their fault for selling crack. When it's white people taking opioids and fentanyl, it's the Jews for owning big pharma.
Yeah. But how does this tie back to liberalism? Well, what does liberalism say? It says like, yeah, being a slut and sleeping around with as many people as possible, that's liberating. Like that's your choice, your body, your choice. Any religious value that tells you otherwise is just slut shaming. Like that's backwards. Like we're feminists now. Like no man can tell me what to do or how to dress. So that eliminates the role of the father immediately, right? Because traditionally the father keeps his woman folk in check, including his wife, but also his daughters or his sisters. He, as a masculine patriarch, has to keep all the women in his family in check. Feminism, which comes from liberalism, destroys that because it says, no, women have to be equal to men. There is no such thing as a male patriarch. Women should have equal role. No man can tell me how to dress or how to act or who I can sleep with. So when you introduce that idea into a community, it creates this this feminist culture, this slut culture. It destroys the possibility of marriage. Like no guy wants to marry some woman with 50 bodies. That's the cause of that. Like the reason why we have so many incels, this reason that we have so many men who can't find like a chaste, good woman to get married to is because of liberalism. It's because of the Enlightenment. For one, or drugs, even drugs and alcohol. Like, oh, your religion says don't get high. Well, that's backwards. Like, you should be able to experience whatever you want and go ahead and smoke the joint. Go ahead and drink as much as you want. It's liberating. Like, you should be able to enjoy all of these hedonistic pleasures. And anyone that tells you not to, like, they're just trying to chain you and hold you back from enjoying life.
Right. Even though Allah is trying to protect us, Allah is telling us that this is forbidden for a reason, and we've seen the results when you allow all this. It's going to poison you. And at the same time, the people that have promoted feminism, they realize that it was wrong, but then they point the finger at Muslims to say, you're oppressing the women. You're oppressing the women. They're covering themselves. They're covered in this. And then you don't realize the women choose to wear niqab if they want to. They choose to put on the hijab if they want. Nobody's... Well, what's your response?
They do choose. I agree, but ultimately, it's not about them choosing. Like in a patriarchal society, like I don't care. Like traditionally, the patriarch doesn't care if you choose to wear it or not. Like you have to wear it. Like that's something that is required. Like you can't be a slut. Like you can't go and sleep with whoever you want. You can't go and show yourself and act, in this kind of promiscuous way. Like that's the whole point of patriarchy. It's not equality. Men have control. That doesn't mean women are slaves. No, women have rights as well. They have a degree of independence because they can have their own property. They can choose like who they get married to in most cases, but it's still a patriarchy. This is not an equal system. Like that's what distinguishes like traditional societies from liberalized ones. And the people who the people who simp the most for women are liberals. And if we want to bring a racial analysis, it's whites. Like whites are the biggest simps. It's not the black men. Like black men are the most based. Like and arguably,
you're gonna get so mad. But they don't have a repopulation problem. They're having babies. They're making babies, right?
Yeah,
white people could easily solve this problem if they were just getting married and having children. But this seems like something they're never pointing the fingers at. They'll point the fingers at blacks and Jews and all this. When is it time to point the finger at themselves and be like, wait, it's time for us to have some kids?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be going after like these kinds of white nationalists and to the same extent.
Well, it's not white nationalists, it's just white people in general. I'm not saying...
white people in general, but like especially when these white nationalists like start talking trash and they start slamming other races and they start like, fine, you want to make jokes, like you make a lot of jokes about like racist jokes. Okay, racism can be funny like when you're joking around. Yeah. You agree?
Yeah, but when you actually believe it, I love joking about it. Like you could pick fun at everything, and I do all the time. They make Chinese jokes about me and stuff. But then when you actually believe that a race is supreme, then I'm like, oh wait, hold up.
Yeah, it's just repulsive. Like it's just irrational, and then they get offended when we clap back. Like that's the surprising part. Like they're suddenly offended. Like I was talking to someone like that you've talked to before, Owen Benjamin.
I love that guy.
So Owen Benjamin, he has some good stuff. But I was interviewing him, And he was going off on black people, and he was just saying, yeah, why can't I use the N-word? And yeah, I should be able to use the N-word whenever I want. And blacks, yeah, they tend to steal bikes and they have this crime problem, blah blah blah. Like, it was a very uncharitable, to say the least, portrayal of blacks. And then I said, okay, well, if we want to engage in that, like, what about whites? Like, what about the history of white colonialism? What about the history of whites genociding others? Like, how do you compare that to like stealing bikes?
What was
And he got
response?
extremely offended. He got extremely offended, and he was like, how you shouldn't paint all whites with the same brush. Oh, okay,
How long
now
ago was that?
you have to be.
Because recently he's been going off on the white victim mentality. He's been nonstop. I see him talking about the frog and this and like just how you need to have solutions. You can't need. He said I think he agrees with us now. But when was that?
This was maybe 4 months ago. Yeah, as earlier this year, maybe in the spring.
Oh, okay, yeah. Because
It's on my
recently
channel.
he's going at white people with the victim mentality hard.
Yeah, I mean, he's naturally a contrarian, so I think he'll just
He's a
oppose.
comedian. Comedians will always have
Yeah.
that contrarian point of view. Do you believe in race realism?
I've studied it to a certain extent, and I don't think it's as big a deal as people make it out to be. I think that because from an Islamic standpoint, the verse in the Quran, you tweeted it recently, that Allah has created people with different colors and different tongues so that they may come to know each other, different tribes and different colors so that they may come to know one another. And I think what that verse indicates is that there are like substantial differences between people. Like, it's like more than skin deep differences. Like, different races, different tribes, like there are significant differences between us. And that's part of like the beauty of the creation of Allah. Allah can create us where we do have like differences, and we're all still one human race. We're all descended from one father and one mother, Adam and Eve. So I think that's the beauty of Islam. So if we take that and we say, okay, well, there could be like differences in IQ. There could be differences in certain racial tendencies. Okay, like maybe that's the case. It's only a problem if you fetishize IQ and you say like, oh, IQ means you're just a better person. If you have a higher IQ, you're a better person. But Muslims have never had this view. Like, and the Quran is clear. Like, the best of you are the ones who are the most pious. The most honored of you are the ones who are the most pious. Piety, being a good person, like being a generous person, believing in God, worshiping God, submitting to God, that's what makes you better. Being smart, like there's plenty of geniuses who are the most evil, disgusting people in history. In fact, whites are constantly criticizing Jews for this. And I'm not necessarily endorsing that argument, but they say that, oh, well, these white supremacists or white nationalists, they say, well, the Jews, they have high IQ, but they use it for evil. They use it for subverting us and XYZ. So okay, so you recognize that having IQ doesn't necessarily make you a good person. So why then are you just pooping on? Yeah, why are you pooping on other races for having lower IQ? Like, it's completely inconsistent, the kinds of arguments that they make. And there's so many of these inconsistencies. I just tweeted they claim that, okay, Jews were forcefully expelled from 109 countries. Yeah. So, what does that tell you about Jews? Well, guess what? Whites have also been expelled from a lot of countries for the same reasons, that whites are subversive. Whites came through colonialism. They took over our lands. They took over our government, and they subverted our culture. They subverted our religions. We were a very happy, traditional, religious, patriarchal society. The whites came in and they unveiled our women. They said, your women can't be veiled. You can't have multiple wives. It can only be monogamy. And actually, if you want sex outside of marriage, no problem. That's part of freedom. And everyone is equal, blah, blah, blah. Like, the whites came into all our countries. They destroyed our religion. They destroyed our culture. And also, by the way, like, this is another white nationalist critique. They say, oh, the Jews in Hollywood, they turned all these superheroes gay, and all of Star Wars has become gay and trans. And so they're subverting our culture. They're subverting our most important fictional characters and our heritage. the whites did the same thing, except they did on like a much worse scale, because the whites came into the Muslim countries and they said, oh, you know, your prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was a feminist too. Like he was a feminist, he was liberal, like he was in support. Yeah, this is the kind of distortion that they do of our religion. And then they were like expelled, except the problem is they didn't really leave. They just exercised the same kind of control from for thousands of miles away, because of this hegemony that the Western world has over the global South, over the Muslim world, over Africans, South Americans, like constantly subverting the democratic process, for example, coups, assassinating presidents. Like this is all coming from what? The CIA. Who was the director of the CIA, or who was the founder of the CIA? Most of the CIA has been led by whites.
Yep. It's funny when you see people like Dr. Fauci with COVID, or you see Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, George Bush Sr., you see Reagan, people that were responsible for the neocon movement. All of them are whites, and then they say like, oh, well, they've been subverted by Zionists. When do they take accountability for the fact that they made the decisions to team up with these people?
Yeah, I mean, this is the argument. It's crazy because they make the argument, but they just are so blind to their own involvement in it. Like they say, like, well, Jews are over. Can you deny? Like, I've debated a couple of these white nationalists. They say, can you deny that Jews are overrepresented in Hollywood? And I say, okay, fine, they're overrepresented in Hollywood, but look at global media. Global media includes, you know, these worldwide networks, because, you know, it's not just American media. The U.S. broadcasts media, including news, movies, film, music, books, all across the globe. Whites are also overrepresented if you look at the entire global population. When it comes to who dominates media globally, whites are also overrepresented. It's not like you have equal representation from Indonesians or people from Botswana or people from Cuba. No, it's mostly dominated by whites. So whites are also, if it's evil for Jews to be overrepresented and to be working the system for their own personal interests, whites are also overrepresented, and they're also trying to manipulate things in their interests, in white interests. And they've been doing it for hundreds of years now. They've been doing it for a long time, since the colonial period. I always tell Muslims this as well. I say, look, you know, yes, I agree that when we look at the situation with Palestine right now, and even the war on terror, the attack on the Middle East, the neocons were primarily Jewish, Zionist, Jewish supremacists, Jewish extremists. Yeah, they're a big problem. But colonialism, which was the cause of the genocide of millions of Muslims and was an acute attack on Islam, Jews weren't in charge of colonialism. Mm-hmm. The British East India Company was not led by Jews. It was whites.
The funny thing is, when you point this out, I noticed, if you've seen the response, I was actually mind blown by the response. Everyone just says, you're anti-white. You hate whites. We can't trust him. And it's like, what did I say that was incorrect? I said white supremacy has no basis in any like in the religions of Christianity and Islam. That's factually true. I talk about the Haitian cat eating story in America. That was factually incorrect. The Haitian, that was not even an American. That was an American woman. That wasn't a Haitian woman. And they say, you hate whites. You hate whites. Like, well, can we have a conversation about this? You guys are doing the same thing that the Jews do when you try to talk about Jewish involvement in politics. They're like, oh, you're anti-Semitic. Now, if I talk about the whites' involvement in the neocon movement, or you talk about whites' involvement in the media or in the enlightenment movement, now I'm anti-white. Now I hate whites. Now but
yeah, their response to you was, oy vey, shut it down. That's how they responded to you, like by making simple observations and simple points in response to their belligerence, like in response to what they were like. I don't get it. Like, fine, like let's talk about the whole issue of white replacement and immigration. Okay, immigration, I view it as a tool. Like it's a tool that's being used by these liberal powers, global liberal powers, to actually dissolve races and religious groups. So including whites, including Muslims. Like the way Muslim identity is not based on race, it's based on like religious belief. So by attacking Islam as a religion and promoting like blasphemy, like making blasphemy allowed, like legal in the Muslim world, bringing in a lot of non-Muslims into Muslim countries and then allowing them to build like elaborate religious institutions and structures in the Muslim world and defunding mosques. Like this is happening in a lot of Muslim countries. Why? Because there's a secularization agenda. They want to secularize the Muslim population, and they've taken these kinds of efforts in order to do that. Immigration is part of it, for example, but that's attacking Muslim identity. You attack white identity by promoting like race mixing, by promoting immigration. So I do think that's the kind of tool that is being done, like used, and there is a demographic replacement. I think that is happening. But as Muslims, okay, we can sympathize. We can say, okay, yeah, imagine the Japanese, like even liberals, like even these libtards would say, or Native Americans, if like there was a deliberate program to take out the Japanese race or Native Americans, like we're going to go to these Native American territories and we're going to, flood it with, I don't know, Indians or Arabs. And we're going to promote these Arabs and Native Americans to mix so that eventually we erase the Native American race. Mm-hmm. We erase the Japanese race or the Filipino race through this kind of deliberate project. Even the libtards, even left wing would say, yeah, this is wrong. Like this is something that's problematic. But for some reason, like when it comes to whites, that's just accepted. Like, so I think that there is a valid grievance there. Because whites are a victim, just like Muslims are victims of this larger liberal hegemony, this larger liberal project that's trying to erase all these kinds of distinctions between people. But what I'm not sympathetic to is when those same white nationalists, like if those white nationalists only care about preserving their race and they only care about preserving their culture, okay, there is something that Muslims can sympathize with, even though we don't agree on everything. We can still sympathize with that to a certain extent. Muslims can even take like an anti-immigrant position. Like I'm anti-immigrant in a lot of ways, in the sense that I don't want Muslims to come to the West and become liberalized at even a faster rate. Mm-hmm. I don't want Muslims to come to the West and start becoming like LGBT supporting feminists. Like I don't want Muslim, because that's what happens, unfortunately. Yeah. You have a lot of Muslim immigrants that come and that happens. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, I don't know what switched like recently with some of these commenters or these white identitarians. They started to get supremacist, like very overtly supremacist. Like, yeah, we want to preserve our race, and also, Haitians are disgusting subhumans, and black people are savages, and Arabs are this and that. Okay, I'm not going to support that. You're only antagonizing someone that could have been sympathetic, or someone could have seen the bigger picture. You're only antagonizing people like SNEAKO. You're only antagonizing. Like, what is the logic of that? Like, what's the sense of that? Like, you want to be like some kind of wignat, redneck, white supremacist? Okay, like, be that. We can play that game. We can play the meme game. We can meme just as good as you two, and counteract that. But we're not going to be on board with this kind of overt racial supremacy. It's irrational. It's disgusting. It's contrary to our religion, like as you've expressed so well. So,
how do you think my response to this could be? Obviously, like the beginning of the stream, I was covering the response that Tate had. It was the first time like he spoke about me publicly in years, and he said like, I don't want to, like, this is the reason I don't talk to you, blah blah blah. And I just said like, well, like, it doesn't matter what you think like about friendship or whatever, or if I'm a snake, like what you said is factually incorrect. Like white supremacy is not totally right. Like it literally, it's one of the fundamentals of Islam. Like this is I don't know if you think about my comparison to Iblis and how he became Shaitan when he rejected God, when God told him to prostrate, and he said no, he thinks he's better than that. That was a first act of racism in a way. It was a superiority complex, which is what racism is. So I don't know if I was going overboard. Andrew Tate said like, oh, you're trying to be a prophet, like showing me scripture or stuff like this. It's like, how else could we get to the truth if not looking back at Quran Sunnah?
Yeah, I thought that Andrew Tate cared about truth. I thought like that was one of his main points when he's counteracting these charges against him, and people are slandering his name. They're accusing him of being like a human trafficker, etc. And there's always an appeal to truth, like what is true and what is false. That is what matters. And I don't know why he would depict you or claim that you are doing something wrong by speaking the truth. Like, how can he deny that white supremacy is something bad, like something evil and destructive? Did he make an argument? Like, I didn't see any argument that he made to support that.
No, he didn't. He got upset that I said that he thought I called him a Jew. But I was saying, like, a supremacist ideology, believing in white supremacy, is almost identical to the Zionism and the problem with Talmudic Judaism that we call out, right? If they believe that they're the chosen race and everybody else is goy, that's a supremacist ideology. So believing that whites are the supreme race is identical. And I've actually come to realize that a lot of the white nationalists that have adopted white supremacy, they have seen the problem with Zionism and they pretty much just copy and pasted it. And now they say we're white Christians, white Christian nationalists. Well, the truth is whiteness has nothing to do with Christianity. So they've just made up their own religion. Then they start saying Jesus is white. And then we get a real problem like, well, he clearly wasn't. He was from the Palestine region. He was born in, what was the city? He was born Nazareth? He was born in Nazareth. Yeah, he wore a thobe and all this. Like, he was not a white guy. And I've come to realize a lot of them worship whiteness. And they put whiteness ahead of Christianity. In fact, as a friend of mine, Nick said that he would prefer marrying a white atheist. Or no, he would prefer having white atheists in his country than black Christians. He didn't say black, but he said than savage Christians. You know what he means by saying that. And no hate towards him. I love the guy. I think he's doing great things. And may Allah bless him and guide him. But that's a clear flaw. Like, you can't put race ahead of your own faith.
Yeah, this is a contradiction in their position. Like, I can get it. I get it. Like, if you're an atheist, white nationalist, like, whiteness is the only basis for your identity because you've rejected religion, you've rejected cultures. But if you're a Christian, like, how can you justify being a white nationalist, or let alone a white supremacist? Because, like, when you look at the United States, like, the most religious factions are non-white amongst the Christians. Haitians are Catholic mostly, and they're deeply religious. Like, their religiosity is much higher than whites in the U.S. for sure. Hispanics as well. Like, they are more Catholic than whites. Yep. Overall. So if you want, like, a more Catholic nation or a more Christian nation, then you should want more people that are abiding by Christianity, or are abiding by, the church.
It's a very uncomfortable truth. Church. But here's the thing. It's like, if they're saying there's Christian nationalism, which is why I like the A24, because, there is a need for religiosity back in America. And that's what Ye was trying to do. He was trying to, like, source and rewrite the Constitution. Let's source it to the Bible. I think that makes more sense than what they're offering now. But the movement now, the Christian nationalists, they call themselves Christian nationalists, but they prefer whiteness over Christian nationalism. It's a flaw in the fundamentals of their belief system.
Yeah, it leads to contradictions. It leads to these kinds of contradictions where, like you were saying, marriage. Yeah, it is a contradiction to say that you will marry a white atheist as opposed to not necessarily even black, like any other race, like Asian Christian, black Christian, Hispanic Christian. That's one type of contradiction, but just in terms of society, like the progression of society, white societies are increasingly more secular. They're more secular liberal. That means they're adopting more and more of these liberal values instead of religious values. And that means that you're going to get more degeneracy. You're going to get more, breakdown of marriage, breakdown of families. It's going to lead to the increase in the atomization of society. Like, religion is what blocks that. Like, because in religion, you have values, like including in Christianity and Islam and even Judaism. You have certain values like, okay, marriage is important, degeneracy is bad, homosexuality is bad, children out of wedlock is bad, having families that don't care about each other, that's bad. Like, all of these kinds of values, they come from traditional religion, not from race. Like you being white, it doesn't tell you to care about your parents, for example. Being white in the sense of that you actually taking care of them in their old age as opposed to shipping them off into a nursing home. Your race doesn't tell you, not to be a slut or not to be, sleeping around and having children out of wedlock. Your race doesn't tell you not to shoot up drugs. Like, why not? Like, I'm white, we're preserving the white race, but we're just a society of junkies, or we're a society of feminist, degenerate simps. We're a white society of drag queens. Like, we're a white society of, 50% of our children being LGBT. That's like race doesn't preserve those kinds of values. Religion preserves those values. So if you have a society that prioritizes race, the downfall of religion is only going to be accelerated. Your society is going to go down the toilet at an ever faster rate. And that's what's happening to the West. That's what's been happening. And now you have some of these figures who are like, oh, like maybe Yay 24, like maybe someone like Nick Fuentes. Others, they're saying, okay, maybe religion does have some purpose. We want to say Christ is king. We want to say that religion is good, but they're just LARPing, actually. They're just LARPing because a lot of these Christians online, they're not going to church. They're not like living Christian lives. It's just some label that they've taken on, but they don't really know how to be traditional Christians because that knowledge has been lost. Liberalism has destroyed that. Like they don't have like this idea of sunnah. Like Muslims have the concept of sunnah,
Right.
and we practice like sunnah is not just like an abstract idea. Sunnah means it's like a living tradition. Like you, for example, mashallah, I know that SNEAKO, he didn't just read Islam out of a book, like abstract ideas out of a book, and then started practicing it. You learned Islam primarily through your interaction. Like you spend a lot of time with other Muslims. Like you go to a Muslim country like Bosnia or Saudi, you're spending time with Muslims, you're interacting. That's how you're getting like a lot of values, and maybe you don't even realize it. Like maybe you don't even realize.
I definitely do. It's much easier. Like that's how I learned Surah Al-Fatiha. My brother, the Warner, when we were going back and forth on the train from Mecca to Medina, we have time to kill, and so I'm reciting the first lines, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and trying to get the pronunciations right. And that was how I learned how to recite. And then even learning the manners and everything, and how to eat with things like the right hand, or how to sleep properly, how to wash and make wudu properly. That's stuff that like reading it, I would not be able to learn. Like, okay, how do I wash correctly so that the drop of the water goes down on my finger or whatever, or how to inhale the water when you make wudu. This is why it's important to have Muslim brotherhood. And that's something I really value with Islam that I didn't know before I reverted, is how strong the brotherhood is. In fact, the friend problem, because I know a lot of people are lonely in the West, and especially with social media, when you become Muslim, you have friends all over the world because you have the same values, you have the same goals, the same objective. You don't have to of course, like you have to keep your guard up to some extent, but you know that overall you could trust these people a lot more than you can a complete stranger or somebody who is an atheist or whatever. You know that on the very basis you have a common shared objective. And I found like while I travel all over the world, when I meet a Muslim brother, stuff like that, these people become friends instantly. And from personal experience, a lot of stuff I don't even stream, we'll be able to travel. We'll go like visit different cities together, do things like horseback riding, shooting guns, praying together, having conversations, laughing, spending after Isha prayer, we're like hanging out, having, tea and stuff and talking, all those conversations, stuff like that. I did not know Islam brought that, but it really fixed this loneliness problem. And I think that I have friends all over the world now.
Yeah, mashallah. Yeah, so the brotherhood is very important. The community, like having a community, that's a fundamental human need that everyone has. And when society is being atomized, like everyone is just doing their own thing, like concerned about, living, like making rent, going to work. That's like a very atomized existence. Like people are very lonely. They don't have friends. They don't have family. And Islam provides a solution to that. But I was saying about the sunnah, like it's something that's living, like you're basically when you learn from a Muslim Surah Al-Fatiha, or how to make wudu, or like how to treat your elders, how to respect your elders, how to treat, poor people, like those are, you're not just learning from other Muslims, because that Muslim that you're learning from learned it from the previous generation, and he learned it from the previous generation, and so on, all the way to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And of course, the Prophet ﷺ learned it from the Archangel Gabriel, Jibril, who brought it from God, from Allah. So your practice is going straight to the source through an unbroken chain. That's the living tradition of Islam. And that's very distinct from something like the abstract idea of Christianity, like, oh, we want a theocracy. Okay, what does a theocracy actually mean? Like, what does it mean to actually be a God-fearing Christian? It's more than just like putting crosses in the chat, like, or W Christianity in the chat. Like, there's more to it actually. But unfortunately that, has been lost. That has been lost and replaced by a kind of atomized, deracinated, modern, Western, Americanized culture of McDonald's and blue jeans and Marvel movies. Like, that's the thing. If you talk to millennials like my age, or even your age, Generation Z, if people are nostalgic about the 90s, like, oh, the 90s, such a good time. And the things that they're nostalgic about are like movies or restaurants. Like, oh, remember back in the day, Pizza Hut was actually a sit-down restaurant. It wasn't just somewhere you order pizza. You could actually sit down at Pizza Hut. Like, these are the things that they're nostalgic about, which I get it. Like, people are nostalgic about what they grew up with and what they enjoyed as children. You're nostalgic about that, like places, movies, music, even smells. You can be nostalgic about certain smells. Mm-hmm. But like, look at how it's like all consumerism. It's a very low culture. It's not like you're nostalgic about like an amazing civilization, or like the beauty of like a religious tradition, or like that's the kind or like Christian tradition. Like, that's not what they're nostalgic about. So that just shows that they're just LARPing with this Christian label. And Christians who are listening to this, they should be upset about that. They should be upset. Like, what happened? Like, what destroyed our connection to the past, like this religious tradition? Like, what destroyed that? Why is church attendance dropping? Why are the numbers of Christians dropping significantly, precipitously, year after year? Why do we see so many Christians becoming these like, oh, I'm spiritual, but I don't believe in any organized religion? What's causing that? Like, if you want to be a racist about it, you can say, well, this is because of whites. Whites are the cause of this. I'm not endorsing that. I'm saying that we should take a look at the ideology that's been spread to the world. That is beyond any race. That ideology is liberalism. And you have white liberals, you have Jewish liberals. Now, increasingly, you have Muslim liberals. And I hate them also. I hate these, again, liberal in the philosophical sense. So left wing and right wing, they're under the philosophy of liberalism. You have Muslims, like, look at the UK. How many Muslim members of parliament they have their Muslim mayor, like quote unquote Muslim, but he's like a brown Muslim background, but he's preaching like all kinds of degeneracy. He's preaching all kinds of anti-religious attitudes. So these Muslims or Muslim background, they've also adopted liberalism, and they're spreading it, and they're attacking Muslims as well. Muslims like me, because they say I'm an extremist because I don't believe that you can have gay marriage, and I don't think that's acceptable. I don't think that, women are equal to men in the marriage. There's a hierarchy, you have patriarchy. Women are equal to men spiritually. Yes, I agree. But in terms of the family, you have a man of the house, you have the husband, he makes, the final decision, etc. So they hate me for that. They call me extremist.
Well, W extremism. What would you consider a liberal Muslim? Because I've interacted some. There's a word that is fun. Actually, I don't want to repeat it right now, but it's a version of hijabi. Or like, you understand.
Yeah, hijabi. We know hijabi.
Okay. So what would you consider a liberal Muslim?
Liberal Muslim is just like a Christian, a liberal, or a Jewish liberal, Hindu liberal. Their I don't want to say their real religion, but their ultimate values go to liberalism. Their ultimate value, like the thing that is the most important, is freedom and equality. Like, that's the most important value. So you have like liberal Muslims will say something like, Kamala Harris,
Is
or
Brad.
let's say Barack Obama, or is Brad? Yeah. No, Barack Obama, like, oh, may Allah grant him Jannatil Firdaus. May Allah give him the highest Jannah. Barack Obama, because he's liberal, but Donald Trump is going to hell. Like, Donald Trump is basically like, what is making you decide that Barack goes to heaven and Donald goes to hell? Well, one is more liberal and the other is less liberal. So that's not what Islam says. Islam says that it's based on belief, like your iman and your good deeds. That's what determines how God will judge you in the akhirah. But they say that no, it's like how tolerant you are, how pro LGBT you are, for example. Like that's like what's really determining their values and their beliefs is not Islam. It's not the Quran and the Sunnah. Their values are based off of this idea of freedom and equality as maximum, the most important values.
What would you recommend Christians do to get back to that traditional Christianity? Because if you look at the ones that are really vocal on social media, and my friends included, some have corrupted it with numerology, some have corrupted it with racist, or with racial supremacy. Some have just completely kind of abandoned it. Some people, just say that Jesus saved. Some of them are Protestant, and that's just like a whole other thing. So what do you recommend they do to get back to true Christianity? Because if we're being realistic, in America, it's more likely, in my opinion, that there's some sort of Christian nationalism than Sharia law taking over. I think a lot of these Christian nationalists would prefer white Sharia law over Christian nationalism for everybody. I think that's how much they value whiteness. So if we were looking at to fix the problem, you need to have some sort of like traditional Christianity come back. I think that's some sort of religiosity.
Where can they get that? Like, where can they get that? All of their churches have been infiltrated. Like the Catholic Church has been fully liberalized, like since the 1960s. Like the Pope is basically a universalist. They believe that it doesn't matter.
Something about Abrahamic religions all being true, and that all religions are trying to get to God. And then he's blessing, the Pope is blessing gay marriages. And then if you look at the role of the Pope, he's kind of like the president of the Catholic government. He's in charge. Like that's the top G of Catholicism, regardless of what anybody thinks. Catholics like to cope about that, but that's true. Look at the Vatican and look at that system. So
so they're fully infiltrated. Like they're fully infiltrated. Eastern Orthodox, similar thing. Like they're not some kind of trad alternative. They've also been infiltrated, and they have a lot of, not as bad as the Catholic Church, but still significant. But it's like a systemic problem with Christianity. Christianity hasn't been preserved. If you think that Christianity is basically the teachings of Jesus, like this is not based in fact. Like it's not based in like the Bible. If you think that the Bible is preserved, that is completely out of touch with reality, and biblical studies for over 100 years has basically proven that the Bible is not authentic and can't be traced back to Jesus, let alone Moses or Abraham. So the best option, like that's why we have Islam. Like that's why Islam came, because Christianity was lost. And that's why there's a new revelation that comes from God, a new covenant that comes from God with the final prophet. But in the scenario that you're giving me, we're assuming that, okay, these Christians are not going to become Muslim. Okay, then the best bet that they have is, like you mentioned, white Sharia, or like the white Taliban, or like, a Christian Taliban or Christian Sharia. They just need to like borrow from Islam, because Islam does have a complete system, a traditional system, religious law that works, that it's ultimately rational and just. Just take that and adapt it, and then pretend like it's it's Christianity. Just pretend like we'll just go along with it, but we all know, like we'll know it.
But they would accept that more because they have this ego attachment where they believe, and I'm sure you've seen it when I've been talking more about Islam, like the Arabs bought SNEAKO. SNEAKO's owned by Iran. SNEAKO's funded even Stephen Yaxley Lennon, Tommy Rubenstein. Tel Aviv Tommy, he said SNEAKO is being funded by the Saudi government. Like, they think that being Muslim is being Arabic. They think they've been brainwashed so much by the media to think that Islam is a brown terrorist religion. So their egos cannot be relinquished to accept Islam, even though it fits their entire ideology. It fixes all the problems. So what they need to do is pretend like Sharia law is Christian and then just do all the same things Muslims do and then just say Christ is king.
Yeah, basically. Like, you basically need to put your women in burqas. You need to like have punishments for promiscuity, like read the Quran. There's lashing for fornication. 100 lashes. You can also, if it's adultery, like if a married woman or a married man cheats on his wife, then he gets stoned. Like, these are the kinds of punishments in Islam. You need to reinstitute stoning. You need to reinstitute like cutting the hand for theft. Like, look at the kind of financial malfeasance in the West. Like, look at someone like Bernie Madoff or some of these bankers that have stolen millions and billions of dollars from the populace through their behavior, like through their financial dealings. Like, yeah, cut off their hands. Let's see how much, theft there's going to be if these criminals get their hands chopped, like Islam says. You'll have a lot less theft in society, as opposed to like giving them this kind of slap on the wrist in minimum security prisons. It's like club fed. It's like just a vacation for these white collar criminals. No, cut the hand. That's what Islam says. How about instituting anti-riba, like anti-gambling? How about that? Like how much has gambling destroyed? How many lives has gambling destroyed? Alcohol, how many lives has alcohol destroyed?
Right.
Look at the use of drugs, like, what was that? Pornography, exactly. Like, all of these societal cancers would be eliminated. But you can't just say, like, you can't just have this theoretical idea like porn is bad, gambling is bad, alcohol is bad. You need to have a system. Like, you need to have a system that not only bans it, but also creates values around it, like shaming values. And that's how you really embed, like, people internalize the values, as opposed to, oh, it's just something over your head and you're going to get punished if you do it. Actually, when you like socialize people, then they just are pious because of the way they've been brought up, the way that they've been educated, the way that they've been socialized in their communities, in their families. When you have like strong family networks, like a kinship-based family structure, like, that's why Muslim societies are so different, or have been historically, because these values are imbued from a young age. Like, it's a ground up model. It's not like, oh, there's like so much fornication in Muslim societies and there's so much adultery and they have to stone people left, right, and center. That's not the kind of draconian system that Islam has. Yeah, those punishments are there, but the people don't fornicate. Like, Muslims are modest. Like, Muslims don't engage in extramarital sex. Muslims don't engage in like alcoholism. It's because they have been taught from a very young age to actually have an aversion, like a visceral reaction against these things. That comes from like being socialized from the ground up through like very healthy religious families. So that's like a deep kind of social change that has to happen in the West, or any other place where they want to revitalize these traditional values. It's a very difficult process. I don't know many societies that have done it, to like go from modern degeneracy, feminist, modernist, liberal degeneracy.
Nazi Germany. We could argue that Nazi Germany did it, even not with religion, but they were corrupted by, like, pretty much there was like Lut over there. They had all this sexual degeneracy, and Hitler kind of eradicated a lot of that without religion.
Did he eradicate it?
Yeah, he burned a lot of the transgender books. He, like, Berlin was a whole like sexual degenerate fest. You don't think so?
It's hard to tell because it was such a short-lived thing. Like, World War II ended it all, so we don't know like long term would it have lasted.
In the reign, it did. In that short reign, he definitely did.
Yeah, I mean, and the most obvious signs of something like, okay, you have like a transgender clinic and you burnt it down. Okay, but we're talking about like deeper social changes in terms of how people behave. Like, if you have an expectation within your culture, like the Western culture, that, oh, you're gonna, go to school, you're gonna lose your virginity, by at prom or whatever, and yeah, that's good, and you're gonna hook up, you have hookup culture, and you as a woman, you're strong and independent, and you have to flaunt your body. The drinking is a part of the culture. Like all of those kinds of things are very deeply ingrained. How do you change that? How do you first have to recognize it's a problem, which many of them don't, even though it's very obvious, like the fruits of the toxic fruits of these practices. You have to first recognize it. Then how do you reverse it? Is it just like, yeah, I agree. Part of it is just banning. I 100% agree with you. Just ban it. But then I think there's more to the equation as well. But you're absolutely right. We should ban these things.
And the response is funny, and I'm sure you've seen this. As a new Muslim, I'm starting to like understand why your guys' point of view. Like even me talking about this, you see people in the chat like, "F your brown religion." SNEAKO sleeps with goats and this stuff. It's like, if Islam is a brown religion, then what is Christianity? It's from the same place. Mm-hmm. Jesus was like, this is from the same region. They have to, like, okay, Christians, message to you. You need to remove the idea now from your head that Christianity is a white religion. Just take it out. Slowly pull it out like Dumbledore with that dream spell, because it's not. It's from the same place. Islam is just as much of a brown religion as Christianity, as is Judaism. From the same exact place. We share the Holy Lands. Understand that, or else you're never going to bring Christianity back to its traditional values.
I mean, if they want to go like revive white religion, like, okay, go back to the Indo-Europeans, like go back to maybe some of these Nordic religions, like Valhalla, some of these Nordic religions. But if you actually go and look at the details of these Nordic religions, they have all kinds of disgusting and bizarre practices. Like a big part, like look at Hinduism, like if you want to know what the ancient Nordics practice, like these ancient white Nordics, it's basically like Hinduism, because Hindus are also Indo-European. Right. Like they have like a big part of it is horse worship, like a lot of rituals involving horse penis. Like they really value horses because of the ancient Indo-Europeans and the chariots, basically chariot warfare. And the horses were a big part of conquering lands. So Indo-Europeans from Central Asia, they spread to like Persia, the Persian lands, they spread to the subcontinent, and then they spread to Europe. And they were just dominating. And in part of the reason that's given is because they had this superior war technology, like the chariot. But the horse played a very important role in their culture and their religion. So you see a lot of, in Hinduism, like the most ancient Hindu texts have a lot of Hindu practices, like horse practices, like the Ashvamedha, which I've made a lot of fun of because it involves like suffocating a horse. It's like a fertility ritual where you suffocate a horse. And then the queen has to sleep with the dead horse and like put the dead horse's penis in her vagina.
Oh man,
that's
this is the like, Valhalla religion, the Nordic people thing.
Yeah, so you have similar things in the Nordic religion too. Not exactly the Ashvamedha that the Hindus practiced in ancient Hinduism, but like the same roots. Because you've heard of Indo-European languages, right? Mm-hmm. Because like you can tie Sanskrit, for example, it is in the same family of languages as English or German, mm-hmm. or even Farsi in Iran. Like they're all Indo-European languages. They're a family because they came, like you can trace it like a family tree back to an ancient peoples. There's evidence of this. Just like genetically, you can genetically trace, like Europeans and Iranians and Indians, they share some genetic material because they go back to a Central Asian group, the Yamnaya. That's the name that the anthropologists have called them, the Yamnaya. So, and then similarly with religion, like there's families of religions, like you've heard of the Abrahamic religions, they're Semitic. right? They're the Middle Eastern. They're the ones that are coming out of like Palestine, Christianity, Judaism, Islam. You also have the Indic religions. You have Indo-European religions. So the original European religions have more in common with Hinduism than they have with Christianity. That's why you have white pagans that are constantly trashing Christianity. They say that Christians are just worshiping a Jew, a Middle Eastern Jew. That's what this is the white pagan critique of these Christian white nationalists. So they have their own internal divisions. The pagans are saying you white Christians are just worshiping a Middle Eastern Jew. And then the white Christians say, well, you guys are just pagans, so whatever. But
I did not know. Who are these white pagans? Where are they?
I mean, they're extinct now. I mean, oh, you mean today, like people who are LARPing as this? Yeah, they're online.
Oh, okay. What
they're
books
online.
do you recommend I read? I was gifted a bunch of books on my last trip, and I read a lot of what you said about, like, I read this book about the universalism of Islam, and it talks about how it fixes this problem and the comparison and how Christianity has failed in this aspect. Do you have any a book recommendation?
On what exactly?
Well, you probably could tell like where my knowledge of Islam is at, and where what's the word? What's the word for like your level of deen?
Like taqwa?
Your iman. You can see where my level of iman is at. What do you think? What would you recommend I read?
That's a good question. So you want to learn more and get deeper into your knowledge of Islam.
Islam and how it relates to social situations and politics.
Ooh. Have you read my book?
No, I haven't. What's your book?
The Modernist Menace to Islam.
Actually, you know who recommended I read this book? I saw it in a bookstore and the Muzehid in London with Muhammad Hijab, and he said, "Oh, this is Daniel's book." And do I have it? I don't remember if I have it or not. But yeah, I saw it in a bookstore and forgot the name. Maybe people in London know the name of this Muzehid. What's it called? Whatever. Regardless, I was there. I met DGM there. But yeah, I'll read that. It's called The Modernist Menace to Islam. Yep.
And you can find it online. Just Google Modernist Menace to Islam PDF and you'll be able to find it too.
Oh, you don't want people to pay for it?
I just want people to read it. So if you want to, it doesn't even like, I don't get any money from it. The publisher will get money. So they're a good publisher and they're Muslim. So you can support the publisher. But I told them, like, I don't want any royalties. I want you to just print this and spread it as far as possible, as cheaply as possible. So I don't get any royalties, but I just want people to read it. But it'll help you understand liberalism. It'll help you understand how liberalism really was spread throughout the world and how it's causing like so many problems. It's literally leading to the extinction of the human race. Because if you start attacking, not only like you're destroying families, you're destroying communities, they're also destroying the human race as a whole. Why? Because they're introducing all of these technologies. We didn't even cover that in the discussion, like the technologies that they're introducing. Because I know you're like red pilled on the technology question too, right? Because you tweet about Ted Kaczynski, right? And you talk about
the
him
Unabomber wrote all about this, yeah.
Yeah, so you know that the Industrial Revolution and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race. So that's also a part of modernity, but it leads to the extinction of humanity because you have genetic engineering, you have gene editing, you have AI technologies. Like, by the way, like all these white people, white supremacists who are talking about, oh, the genius of the white man, the white IQ. Guess what? It's all going to be irrelevant when AI comes. When AI comes, the whole IQ question won't even matter because AI is going to have top IQ, way beyond anything humans can naturally have. So that whole like that kind of boasting is irrelevant. But yeah, technology is going to make the human race go extinct, basically, and not complete annihilation, because you can just edit your body, you can upload your consciousness into the cloud. You can, if you want to be like a elf or a dragon or an orc. Like some people have these kinds of fantasies, right? Like they suffer from these kinds of like psychological problems or schizophrenia. Well, you can use technology to actually edit your body. or just virtual reality. Just upload your entire life, your entire existence is going to be on, some kind of server. Like that's the kind of future that we're really facing. Not to mention how technology is used for surveillance, like mass surveillance, to just control us constantly. Like you can't even go to the bathroom without your phone, like the mic on your phone being turned on by some FBI agent or some like NSA agent to like record like you taking a dump in the morning. Like that's the level of surveillance that we have. Like we're all carrying our our smartphones, right? So there's no way to get off the grid. That's really a crushing of the human spirit. It's because of technology creates that dystopia. And then you have like these white supremacist morons that are like, oh, well, GDP, technology, we're so amazing, we're so superior, we invented all this stuff. Like, okay, great. Like this is the kind of stuff that's going to lead to human beings being extinct.
Last question. Mufti Cheesecake keeps asking me, are Muslims allowed to vote?
There are differing opinions on this, but I think the strongest opinion is that you should not vote. Because basically you're saying like
you're picking a kafir. They're picking which kafir to lead the country, right?
Well, implicitly, you're basically saying that human beings have the right to make laws for humanity, like in a particular country or whatever. And as Muslims, we believe that it's Allah. Like God is the one who makes laws. Like He is the legislator. He's the one who has the ultimate right to decide like how we live our lives. And if you participate in a kind of electoral system or a democratic system, that takes the sovereignty from God and puts it in the hands of men or women or, whatever. So that's like, I think, a pretty compelling argument. And then another argument that's secondary to that is that what has voting ever changed? Like voting doesn't do anything. You're like co-signing some person who's going to go into office and then bomb a bunch of Muslims. Like, so why I don't want to be co-signed on that, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And yeah, I mean the things that, especially in this election, like this presidential election, Kamala and Trump, they're indistinguishable. Like they have the same positions on everything,
right.
On abortion, on Israel, on
immigration is slightly different, I guess. But like even Trump is saying that weed is good. I guess the major argument, even though he saw his tweet about, like if Kamala wins and you see a bunch of Afghanistan and Pakistani people burning the flag, which is like not even in America. Yeah. Also, you see how much they align with the Zionists very clearly, shaking hands with Netanyahu at his house. But the argument could be, it's better to have a man than a woman.
Well, it depends on your perspective. Like if you want the U.S. to crash and burn, then maybe a woman is better.
Do you want that?
Well,
yes. Don't get that clip. No, you don't.
Don't get that clip.
No. We don't want the United States to
here's a perspective. Here's a perspective for you.
Oh my god.
Okay. Here's a perspective. No. Like imagine if you are, living in Afghanistan and your entire family has been eliminated literally because of a drone strike, or you're like living in, I don't know, Honduras, or you're living in Venezuela and your country is in constant state of turmoil because the CIA keeps cooing whatever president you guys elect, your country. Or imagine like you're in Mali or you're in one of these African countries where you're in perpetual debt because of a predatory IMF loan and your whole nation is in perpetual poverty. And if the government doesn't pay off the loan, like this high level of interest, they're going to basically come and send militias to destroy, like to massacre your villages. Like if you're the majority of people around the world that has suffered because of the US hegemony, because of this like boot on the necks of every like other race, culture, religion in the world because of US imperialism, US hegemony, then yeah, you don't want the US to continue to be dominant. You don't want the US to continue to be a superpower. You want them to be taken a step down, like take it down a few notches. This kind of disparity, like the inequality that's created by US power, Like, I wish it was the case that the U.S. being a superpower was helping the world, like helping create a safer and better world for everyone. But no, all they do is spread terrorism. All they do is spread this kind of terror, like horror, like nightmare for the rest of the world. So, I mean,
But you live in America.
yeah, I do. Yeah, I was born here, born and raised here. So,
Wait, do you believe
and
that
the thing
or
is,
no?
that, huh?
Do you believe in this?
What I just said?
Yeah.
Yeah, don't you?
Wait. The destruction of America?
Destruction is let's like put it in a more accurate way. I don't want people to be destroyed.
No.
I don't want the American people. I don't want the American people to suffer. I don't want the American people. I don't want the American people to be destroyed. But the government that is funding all kinds of terror around the world, the government that's currently funding a genocide, like supplying weapons to genocide hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, I don't want them to have the same level of power. That's all I'm saying. You want to call it destruction, fine, but I think that's pretty reasonable. I think anyone with a conscience who is actually aware of what the U.S. has engaged in over the past 100 years will agree with me on that. Like, why unless you think that white lives are, more important than the lives of the majority of humanity,
well,
non-white.
you could understand why somebody from Iraq would, but I definitely want
Iraq.
United States.
Fallujah, like you're a mother in Fallujah and your child has been born with, a third arm, like because of the radiation poisoning and the birth defects that have come because the United States government used dirty bombs to bomb Fallujah in their shock and awe campaign. Like, dirty bombs, what does that mean? It means conventional weapons that are laced with plutonium or radioactive waste. So that kind of radiation has caused horrifying birth defects for an entire generation of Iraqis. Not to mention the over 1 million that have been killed, and the millions more who have been turned into refugees. Yeah, I don't blame them for if they don't want the U.S. to continue to be a superpower. Like, I don't blame them. That seems perfectly understandable. Like, that seems like actually quite moderate compared to the kind of anger and rage that I would have if I were in that situation.
Well, no, I disagree. I want the U.S. to thrive and survive. I was born here. I do have some sort of patriotic belief. Yeah, the neocons did bad things, but the U.S. provided so many positive things. And
Vietnam, look at Vietnam. You know about napalm, right? Look at what they've done to Southeast Asia. Like, it's just, if you look at the history and you look at it and you read it in detail, and they don't teach the history. That's the problem. They don't teach the actual history of the United States in public schools, obviously, because it's propaganda. You want to have patriotic citizens that are very committed to the cause. But, especially as a Muslim, and you're going to travel more, inshallah, you're going to talk to more people. Like, there's just some very horrifying, terrible things that the U.S. government has done for the sake of power, for the sake of stealing wealth and resources and bullying the rest of the world. Things that are unprecedented in history. So all of these people are saying, oh, but what if Muslims did this stuff too? No, we didn't have napalm. We didn't have nuclear weapons. We didn't drop bombs, atomic bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Like, these are things that are unprecedented, like horrors. Like, this is what technology brings. These are the fruits of the Enlightenment.
Well, I want the best. I want the best for America. And so, like, overall, I disagree saying let's vote for Kamala Harris so that it could implode quicker and we could bring in a new government. Like, I care about the people that are here now.
That's why I supported Trump, right? I didn't vote for him, but in 2016, I supported Trump because why? Because he's like the X factor who's going to not be bought. He's going to throw a wrench into the whole system. He's going to be like, he's going to end the wars. Wrong. He's going to like fight back against the swamp.
Yes.
What does Donald Trump say? Drain the swamp. That's all I'm saying. I'm basically repeating what Donald Trump 2016 is saying. Drain the swamp so that America can focus on its population. Like, America how about the US government, instead of being so concerned about what's happening in the Middle East or what's happening in Taiwan or what's happening in the Ukraine, how about the US government actually put in some concerns about the state of American people who are increasingly suffering because of inflation? They're suffering because they go to the grocery store and they have to spend $400 for groceries for that week because the dollar that they earn can't buy jack. In the grocery store, you have to spend $4 or $5 for a gallon of milk. You have to spend $10 for a dozen eggs. How about the government address that? How about the government address healthcare? How many people are going bankrupt? American people going bankrupt because of the inability to pay for their healthcare costs. And the insurance companies continue to extract these high premiums. You have to pay $300, $400 a month in order to get insurance coverage. And then when you go to the hospital for whatever reason, you have this huge deductible that you have to pay, $6,000 before the insurance even kicks in. So healthcare is destroying the government, or is destroying the American people, and the government hasn't done jack to address this. What about crime? Is an issue. Crime actually is an issue. The economy is an issue. Drugs are an issue. The pharmaceutical companies being able to mandate all of these kinds of drugs, you know, with the vax that we saw back in 2021 and 2022, all of these kinds of antidepressants that are being mass distributed, where 40 to 50% of adult women are now on antidepressants. Like it's an epidemic. Like this is a huge crisis. How about the American government address these problems? Social media addiction, pornography addiction. Like how I believe that there was a recent study that showed that 1/3 of teenagers are suffering from acute mental distress. Like it's even worse than depression. Why? Because all of these teenage girls are on Instagram and they're seeing all of these filtered photos of all of these beautiful women, and they're falling into depression. They're falling into severe acute depression. They need antidepressants. Like it's no wonder that people are questioning their gender. Like these girls are questioning their gender because of social media. They're being exposed to this stuff. Instagram, TikTok. How about the American government do something about that? I didn't hear Donald Trump or Kamala Harris talk about any of these issues. And the American people are the ones who are suffering from this.
Yeah.
So
someone in the chat said, Nick is proven right again. Alien culture wants to replace the West. Well, so do the Christian nationalists. They want to replace the West as well. That's what people aren't fathoming. Like the West was not created as a Christian country. It was created as an enlightenment. That's what we covered the whole stream. You're not seeing that. So the same movement from the Christian nationalists is also replacement. They want to uproot the entire government, rewrite the Constitution, enact new laws, fire everybody, force religiosity. It's the same exact thing. Just because it's white or it's brown or whatever you think the race is, people are getting afraid, but it's the same ideology. Tell me what the difference is.
I would say that the people, like if you look at per capita or proportionally, like Muslims would be more in favor of like Christian nationalism than white people. Like whites are the most opposed to Christianity and Christian nationalism. They already reject, like whites already went through the whole process of expelling Christianity from their societies. Like like the people in the chat right now asking about Christianity, their grandparents kicked out Christianity. Like their parents and their grandparents like actively try to make their societies and their families less Christian. So this is a complete LARP, and Muslims are the ones who would have been like more supportive. Like I'm sure someone like Nick Fuentes had many Muslim fans, or many Muslims supported like the idea of Christian nationalism because they recognize, well, having a religious society is better than this godless atheism, liberalism that we have in the West. I mean, not all Muslims, but some. And then what do these white nationalists do? They piss that all away. They start saying, oh, you sand monkeys. Oh, you like desert religion. And they start pissing on Muslims. Okay, so what do you expect us to do? Just sit there and take it and not say anything in return? Like that's unacceptable.
Well, they're used to the idea of supremacy, but things are changing, you know, and it's time to start getting realistic. I think this is what I think. These recent conversations the past couple of days are going to be effective, and I think a lot of people's ideologies have been exposed, and people are going to I think people are going to look back at this favorably and rethink about this white replacement and what's happening to the West. It's time to be realistic. It's time to be realistic about what's going to happen to the West.
Like our critique, your critique over the past few days, it's been principle based. You've been able to give a critique based on the Quran. You've cited the Quran. You cited principles with Islam. You're basically citing things that are 1,400 years old. That's the difference between Muslims versus Christians. All Christians can cite is like their favorite social media influencer said this, and he said Christ is king, and it's not based on any principle.
Christ
it's
is
not
king.
Based on any consistency. Whereas we've been very consistent, and we've had like this based on our critique has been based on religious principles that we don't compromise on. So anyone who's objective, like I hope that people who are white or Christian, they're listening to what SNEAKO has been saying, what I've been saying, and they can recognize that's not coming from a place of being anti-white. Like what I said in this stream and what you've said in the past streams is not coming from like a libtard woke critique of whiteness or, oh, Daniel is deconstructing whiteness. No, I'm just using the same logic that you use to belittle and mock and denigrate and demonize other cultures and other races and religions. I'm just holding up a mirror and I'm saying like, okay, well, we can play that game too. It's not a nice game to play. It's not pretty. But it's the game that you chose to play. It's the game. These are the arguments that you want to make against non-whites. So we can repeat those same arguments back at you. So don't cry about it. Like, don't be offended. Like, just have a moment of self-reflection and recognize that the real problem is not race. The real problem is this enlightenment philosophy of liberalism. And the only way to return to a Christian society or a Muslim society, a traditional society, is to attack that problem at the root instead of scapegoating, oh, the Haitians, oh, the blacks, oh, the Arabs, oh, the Jews. Like, that's intellectually lazy, and it doesn't make sense.
Like, imagine, for example, Trump just got an assassination attempt for the second time today, and he was a white Christian. Like, both. Imagine if he was Haitian. Imagine if he was Arab. There would be a ban on Arabs. There'd be
imagine if he was a Jew.
Oh, it'd be a race war. it would instantly be a race war. But it's a white Christian. No one says a word about his race. No one wants to look at the internal problems. They look over it and they blame somebody else. Coming to realize that there's a lot of victim blaming. There's a lot of victim mindset. And I think that's a big detriment, and it holds people back so much. But Daniel, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you. And yeah.
Do we want to announce like a possible debate?
Yes. Okay, so I'm announcing possible debate next week. I got to still figure out the day, between Keith Woods and Daniel Haqiqatjou on white identity. I think that's that. We'll come up with some topics, and maybe we can discuss in future streams about, like, I'll go back and forth with Keith too, and we could figure out some topics to cover. But it seems like the overall theme of the debate is white identity. I think it's a good time for that. Yeah,
I'm excited for that. And yeah, thanks for having me on the stream, SNEAKO. May Allah bless you.
You too.
And anytime you need anything, just let me know.
I appreciate you fighting a good fight. Salam alaikum.
Okay, waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
I want to learn more about these things, bro. And yeah, we are equal, bro. We Muslim believe we are equal because Allah taught us that things. Oof. Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillah for Islam, bro. Oof.